Hey guys, welcome to the Firearm Patriot channel. I'm Russ, and today we're going to take a look at the Timney Alpha Glock trigger that I just received. I purchased this. It cost me right around $158. Now this is supposed to be the hottest Glock trigger out there in the market. Supposed to bring your trigger down to about 3 pounds, and it's a unique trigger. It's got a little drop-in part here for the trigger housing. You've got a Teflon coated trigger bar and also an aluminum trigger, and you have some tools that they have that comes with that to help you install it. They have some very good instructions as well on how to do that, very detailed. We'll look at those in a minute, look at the kit and see what you get. I'm going to install this in my Glock 34 Gen 3. This is one of my carry optic pistols, and I went ahead and reinstalled the factory trigger in it, just kind of give you an idea where that trigger stands at from the factory. And I can tell you right now, not very good. I was actually running a Zev Fulcrum trigger in there, but ammo situation being what it is, we've had to start loading ammo with small rifle primers as far as 9mm go, and that has a little bit harder primer, and the Zev kit would not set that ammo off reliably, so I had to go and take the stock striker spring, put it back in the gun, and what that did was that took a 3-pound trigger and moved it up to about a 5-pound trigger, so it wasn't nearly as good with the stock spring. That's should be one of the interesting things about Timney, is you're supposed to be able to use the stock striker spring as well as the stock disconnector to get that 3 pounds. So we'll see if we can really do that. Now this is not going to be an installation video due to the YouTube requirements, and I don't want to get kicked off of YouTube, but we are going to do some trigger pulls on the stock Glock trigger, and then also on the Timney trigger after we get done, show the reset uptake, all that good stuff, and talk a little bit about whether or not I think this is a good competition trigger. So let's go ahead and take a little bit closer look at the Glock 34 with the stock trigger pull and see what we get with that. Okay, again, we're looking at a stock trigger here in this Glock 34. Everything in it stock, disconnector stock, trigger stock. There's nothing in this gun that's not stock. So, you know, the trigger on the Glock, you do have quite a bit of take up on it. It's not the smoothest trigger in the world, especially on the Gen 3s and 4s. I think they've made a lot of improvements on the 5s, but you come back here and you hit this wall, and you know, it's fairly far back as well, and then you got a pretty hard wall. You break and come back, you reset. Okay, so you know, pretty good reset on these triggers, but just a lot of pressure that you have to put on the trigger to make that trigger break. And the problem with that is that particularly on longer shots and shots on the move, it's easy to pull the trigger, or excuse me, the muzzle off target and miss your shot. So that's why a lot of people, particularly in competition, go with aftermarket triggers. So we're going to go ahead and do some trigger pulls here. I'll do 3 trigger pulls on this stock Glock trigger, see where we get. Okay, 6 pounds, 7 ounces. All right, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Pounds, 8 ounces. So it's a little hard to consistently get an even trigger on this as far as the weight on this, but 6 pounds, 6 ounces, that's pretty close to what I usually get on this gun. So you know, you're looking at a pretty heavy trigger, okay, for defensive purposes, but people in the competition world, you know, they like to have sometimes 2.5, 3 pound triggers, just because, again, easier to make those longer shots and less likely you're going to pull your gun off target. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the kit as far as what you get. ahead and open this thing up. So comes packaged very well. You're going to get this anodized aluminum body here, and that's going to drop down in the trigger housing. And here's your sear already built in. It's already spring loaded. It's got a little screw down here at the bottom, and you're going to be able to tighten that in the trigger housing. We have again a Teflon coated trigger bar, and we have an aluminum trigger and a safety blade up here. Now the unique thing about this trigger also here is you see you have a little bit springs here with wings on them, and on any Glock trigger, once you pull the trigger, it doesn't go forward, so you can't pull it unless it's cocked again. So slide has to be worked. On this one, these wing springs here are going to allow that trigger to go forward, so that's going to be a better situation for dry firing. And you've got some kind of clip here too. We'll look at the instructions on that here and just kind of figure out how to do it. They also give you a nice little tool kit. Hopefully everything we'll need is right in here. So looking at the price of this, the price is $148 plus your tax and shipping. Like I said, I ended up paying about $158. They are back ordered now. I mean, you can go on to Timney's website and order it, but you shouldn't expect it for at least 6 weeks. That's how long it took me to get mine. So, that's a long time. But as far as what you get versus other triggers on the market, a full fulcrum Zev trigger will cost you about $285. So you're looking at, again, $148 for a trigger that's supposed to perform as well, if not better, than the Zev fulcrum trigger. So let's go ahead and install this thing. We'll come back and then we'll see how the trigger does as far as the pulls and so forth. Okay, I just want to show you what we've done. We've taken the enclosed housing from the Timney Alpha trigger here, and we've slid it down in the trigger housing of the Glock. You had to take your spring out there, and you also had to remove the trigger bar as well. Now down here at the bottom, there's a screw at the bottom of the Timney piece, and you have a little C piece that goes in there underneath that screw, metal piece, and you tighten that down and make it secure. And you want to make sure in the back you see that red piece right there to make sure it's down far enough in there, because again, this is your sear housing and spring in here. Totally different than any other trigger that I've seen for an aftermarket Glock trigger, but that's kind of how that looks. So the next thing we have here is the Timney trigger and trigger bar, and this is going to go, can I show you from this angle? This is going to go in just like that. Okay, so you can still see the cross there. And then the difference here though in the trigger, instead of having the spring back there in the back, okay, here you got a little different setup. We have a spring with wing on it. It's going to go in that configuration, and we're going to put that under the gun. Now this is probably going to have to go underneath the locking block, and that's going to put quite a bit of pressure on there, and that's going to push that trigger back out after you fire it, unlike the Glock, which just stays in the back position. So we'll go ahead and install that and be right back. Okay guys, I'm back. I've got the Timney Alpha trigger installed in the Glock 34. It wasn't very difficult. Hardest thing about it was making sure you get the springs in the proper location. But overall, I'm very impressed with this trigger. I think the Timney trigger now is to Glock kind of like the Apex trigger is to M&P. It just really substantially improves the trigger on the Glock. And so very impressive. I don't want to say that I think that the Timney trigger is as good as the Apex trigger is in the M&P, because that's, I think, one of the best triggers on the market, but it's pretty close. And again, you get down to a lot of preferences there, and some people may certainly prefer this trigger over the M&P's trigger. So let's go ahead and take a look at the trigger. First of all, it's a flatter trigger. You have the safety blade here. It does have a little bit of take up on it. Not the smoothest on the take up, but nothing that's really problematic either. You get to the wall right there, and there's very minimal effort needed to break the trigger. There you go. So the trigger break, it's very, very minimal, and reset is very minimal. That's the reset. You can hear it, you can feel it. I've heard some people say it doesn't push your trigger forward hard enough. I don't really have an issue with that, but just a very good clean break. I think it's going to be very good for follow-up shots. I don't think I can certainly outrun this trigger with my abilities. Some people maybe can, but I'm not one of those people. I'm not going to take the Zev trigger and put back into this gun. I can tell you that. I think this trigger is much better than the Zev, especially if I can leave the stock striker spring in here and not have to worry about the safety plunger either. A lot of people will modify that safety plunger with a different aftermarket one. So overall, the trigger is excellent, easy to install, $148. There are a lot of triggers out there that cost a lot more that aren't nearly as good as this trigger. So let's go ahead and take the trigger pull on this thing. So let's see what we get. I'll do 3 and take an average of that. So average on that particular set was 2 pounds, 13.8 ounces. It is going to break right around 3 pounds. If you put a lower pound connector in there, it's supposed to go down to about 2.5 pounds. There is additional spring that you have to use instead of the one that's in it. It's a kind of a purplish spring that they give you, and you just replace that spring with the one that's in it now. So overall, again, I don't think you can ask for a better trigger in this Glock. Substantially improves it. It's going to make longer shots easier. It's going to make shots on the move easier if you shoot a Glock 34 in competition. This is their competition model. They don't recommend it for carry. There are no options to stiffen the trigger up, like for example Apex provides with multiple springs to increase the pull weight if you want to carry their guns for duty use or concealed carry. That's not an option here. Maybe at some point in time they'll do that. But very impressed with the Timney Alpha Glock trigger. I think it's probably the best trigger on the market, and certainly at $148 it is your best bang for the buck as well. Probably why they got about a 6-week wait on them, so if you order one today, don't expect to get it anytime soon. So hope you liked the video. Please share it, subscribe. With that being said, this is the Firearm Patriot. Till next time, God bless America.